Hey everyone, it's Michael here from the Goodereader Radio Show. We go live every couple of weeks on the website, goodereader.com, as well as all your favorite podcast networks, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and a myriad of others. So you can stay on top of all of the latest news in the e-reader and e-paper world. So Spotify, it's dedicated music platform. I think everyone knows that, but they're really getting serious about audiobooks. Their deal with Findaway just went through like a couple of weeks ago, and this was announced like last year. So Findaway is sort of one of the largest like aggregators of like ebooks. So when a company wants to offer ebooks like through like a software as a service, or they want to build an app and sell audiobooks, they pretty well contacted Findaway. Findaway powered Kobo audiobooks, Scribd, like a bunch of European sites, and so Spotify acquired them in order to get serious about listing podcasts on a site. They want to sort of make it more important than podcasts on their site, because it's like long form audio. I mean, like a lot of audiobooks are like 8 to 20 hours long, you know, depending on like the length and things like that. And other Spotify news, they just acquired a company that does AI like voices. So the thought behind this is they want to appeal more towards users that want to convert like ebooks into audiobooks and just have like an AI sort of do it for you. So there's something there. The Obamas on their podcast deal with Spotify is expiring. They're fleeing to Audible. So if you like listening to any of that, it's going to be on Audible soon. As well, Spotify's testing out a new system that will allow you to record things directly in the app, which is kind of cool. They're testing it out now, but it's going to be a way that you could soon be able to record, like, you know, with the Spotify app, you'll be able to like submit podcasts directly to the platform by just reading into it. So there's something there. It'll be more applicable to like podcasts, but it'll be able to like appeal to a myriad of type of things. So yeah, that's something that's happening there. If you have a Kobo e-reader, you might know that some models support Dropbox. Dropbox cloud service provider, it allows you to sort of offload a lot of your personal collection to cloud storage. Right now, only the Forma, Sage, and Ellipsa officially support Dropbox. But there's a little hack that you can do to get it on all Kobo e-readers. It's called Nickel Menu, which is a custom designed to launch hacks and access hidden features and settings on Kobo e-readers. So all you really have to do is like search for Nickel Menu from GitHub. So it's like you just Google that, and you can just like, you know, basically follow the instructions there, and you can get Dropbox pretty well on like the Libra 2 and all of the other devices. So you can kind of check that out if you want. We've reviewed a few new devices lately. The Barnes & Noble Nook Glowlight 4e. Entry-level e-reader. It's not exactly 300 ppi, it's like 212 ppi, and it's like about like a $30 difference between the 4e and the regular Nook Glowlight 4. I'd probably say the Nook Glowlight 4 has the best value for your money, but I see what the company's doing with the 4e by having an entry-level e-reader, which is like, you know, basically just like a little over $100. So it appeals to people that are like in the bookstore already browsing for books, and you know, I can buy an e-reader for like literally like $100 now instead of like $130. So, you know, Barnes & Noble hasn't put this on sale yet, because I mean, it just came out like a couple of weeks ago, but I could see like Black Friday, like back to school sales, I could see them discounting this for like as little as like $99 or $89 or something like that. And that will be a compelling buy, because, you know, let's not forget, a lot of people listening to this show probably have had an e-reader before or an e-paper device. Like a smartphone with the e-paper display, an e-reader like a Kindle or a Kobo or something like that, or even you've had Nooks before. So this is sort of like a gateway to the Barnes & Noble ecosystem for people that already shop on the Barnes & Noble website to buy books, or they go to Barnes & Noble like stores to buy books or magazines or newspapers or like whatever, right? Like Barnes & Noble just isn't about books anymore. They're more like a lifestyle store. So it's like a way that you can get a gateway to the Nook ecosystem in terms of like ebooks, and it's a low cost barrier. And once you use this device, you might upgrade in the future when they release something else. So, hardware, there really isn't a huge profit margin on that. Not just for Barnes & Noble, for any company. The real money is not with the hardware, it's with the ecosystem. And that's why like Kobo, Barnes & Noble, and Amazon are like 3 of the biggest companies like in the world. Barnes & Noble's only in the States, but the other 2 companies are like worldwide, and it's just ease of use. It's like a frictionless experience, whereas other companies like Remarkable, they charge subscription fees now because they know that hardware is just one part of like the business. They make money on hardware because it's expensive, but they don't really make money anywhere else. So that's why they developed the subscription method. Almost everybody else in the industry, from like Onyx Books to like Supernote to Boyu to iFlyTech, iReader, the list goes on. They make money with hardware because they don't offer anything else like on their device to make money on. So that's one thing. Speaking of other companies, the Hisense A9, we've kind of like did our hands-on review of it, and it's like it's pretty good. It's a 4G smartphone. It works with like most carriers, from like AT&T to T-Mobile to Rogers to Telstar and so many more carriers. On our full review, we list all the frequency bands as well as the major carriers in Canada and the US that it works with. But it's like $439 for the 6 gig of RAM version, or $409 for the 4 gig of RAM version. So what I like about it is like a giant 6.7 inch display. It's using Encarta 1200, and 1200 is sort of the latest generation Carta. And you may be thinking, hey Mike, what's the difference between Encarta HD, Encarta 1200? Why should I care? So it increases this, it increases like the performance by about 30%. So this includes page turns, interactions with like the device, and like so on. So this is like an interesting type of device to use. It doesn't have Google Play or anything like that, but you can sideload in your own apps. We've also reviewed the Xiaomi Ink Palm Plus, which is like a new device that's just came out. And incidentally, all these devices are on the Goodereader shop at goodereader.com/blog/shop. And the Xiaomi InkPad or Ink Palm Plus is sort of their answer to the Hisense Hi Reader. It's a portable, it's the largest ink palm that they've done. Traditionally, they've done like ink palm minis, which are like $100 devices. They've increased the size from like around 4 inches to about almost 6 inches now. And it's pretty good all in all. It's an interesting way that you could have a dedicated e-reader that like fits in your pocket. It's about $239. So you're not breaking the bank. It has no phone functionality, although it does have Wi-Fi, and you can install apps, which is cool on it. A lot of these brands like Hisense and Xiaomi, traditionally they only sell these like in China. So it's not an easy way for people who want to just go to the store and buy things. get their hands on it, find out if this is something that's of value to them. So, that's why we talk a lot about them on our website, because like if we didn't talk about them, a lot of people wouldn't even know that these existed. And they're pretty good. I mean, we review pretty well everything that comes out. We review so much that we have like piles of stuff that we just can't film fast enough for unboxings and reviews and things like that. We've gotten to the point where it's like we're doing polls on social media, like what should we review next, and like list like 8 devices, because it's like we have so much on our backlog. And I mean, we're a pretty small team, so it's not like we have tons of staff to like help us out with like videos and stuff like that. So we try to do all this like written and video content, so at least you can kind of get a sense on what these bring to the table. And we're not shooting for like an hour on it. We're doing like quick, like sort of 10-minute things, so you can at least get a sense of like, can I see myself using this like on a daily basis? Speaking of what you should get on and use on a daily basis, let's take a look at my sort of top picks of the summer for 2022. First of all, I recommend Ink Palm Plus that we just sort of talked about. The Nook Light 4E, I think is a value, but I think as long as it goes on sale, it's extreme value. The Kindle Paperwhite Signature Edition, it's using actually an Encarta 1200 screen too, so that's why the performance is pretty good. They've introduced like animations on like the page turns to make it like look good. I think the Signature Edition is way better than the base model Paperwhite, just because it like has fast charging. It has like an ambient light sensor that automatically adjusts like the front light display and color temperature system, so it has like a lot of things going for it, and it's better to just pay a little bit more money for something that you're going to use every day and get a little bit more value out of. I also picked the Cobo Libra 2, and you may think like, what about the Sage? That's supposed to be better, right? Like better processor, better everything. Well, I think it's still hampered by battery issues, which is like why Cobo released like a sleep cover case that has a battery built into it in order to just like help it. And it has like a small battery. It's like a 1200 milliamp battery, so it's like really small. And I mean, I'm seeing e-readers with like 6000 milliamp batteries, so I mean, there's no excuse for Cobo to use such woeful batteries. And there's only so much that they could optimize with hardware, whereas like the Libra 2 doesn't really suffer from like a lot of those battery issues. Like a lot of people really like it, and it's like like $40 or $50 cheaper than like the Sage. Still has like physical page turn buttons. It doesn't have the digital note-taking functionality that like the Sage has. It's just like a pure dedicated e-reader. And I think we live in a world now where there's so much out there for people who want to take notes. Like there's no shortage of hybrid e-readers / digital note-taking devices. So I kind of wanted to focus this list on just pure e-readers. So I think that the Libra 2, very, very solid. You can listen to both audiobooks and ebooks. Same with the Kindle Paperwhite. The Nook right now doesn't have any audiobook functionality, but it does have Bluetooth. So Barnes & Noble could offer audiobooks via firmware updates sometime in the future. I really like the upcoming pocketbook era that's going to be on sale in early July. It's actually using an Encarta 1200 screen too. So I mean, you can kind of see a trend here where like so many of these like new e-readers are using Encarta 1200. And I mean, there's a reason why most companies are releasing new hardware like with it, because the performance is just so good, and they don't really have to like have tons of RAM and a crazy processor and everything like that in order to like do that. So yeah, I mean, this new pocketbook is pretty good. It's a 7-inch screen, 300 ppi, warm lighting, and color friendly display. It could support 6 audiobook formats, 26 languages, 19 book formats. It supports graphic novels. It's a dual core processor, and it's looking like really good. So, I've used a lot of pocketbook readers before, and this one has undergone a significant redesign from prior models. Like, pocketbook used to sort of like have big bezels on the bottom, because that's like where the page turn buttons were, unless they were on the side, as well as like the home button, like the back button, the more button. So they've kind of gotten rid of all the buttons on the bottom and now have just buttons on the side. So the home button now is right above the page turn button. So this is probably like the smallest bezels that they've ever had. The bezels are probably the biggest just on the right hand side, because like that's where the battery is now, and that's where all like the physical page turn buttons are. And it's like super small bezels like on the top, the left, and the bottom. It also has a gyroscope too, so if you're left-handed, you can just like do a 360 and just like start turning pages with like your left hand. And that's also good for manga too. Like if you're a manga purist and you're used to just swiping left to see the next page, whereas like in North America, we swipe right, to turn in like the next page. So it's nice that Pocketbook has these options. So that's my probably top pick. And the Hisense High Reader. So this is in no particular order. Like I'm not, saying that the High Reader is like the best or anything like that. But I do think that for portable readers that fit in your pocket, like, Hisense traditionally has only done like phones before, or more recently hi-fi music players. This is the first time they've ever released like a phone looking type device that is just a dedicated e-reader. It's like $399 and comes with a free case, also available in the Goodereader store. It has 36 lights on it. So that's 36 white like LED lights, but there's no warm light system. For some reason, Hisense has never included a warm light system, but it has like a speaker like on it. It's using an octa-core processor, like 4 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of internal storage. Yeah, I mean, it's super. And what's nice about this is it supports 14 languages, including English. So it supports like major European languages, major North American languages, South American languages. It has like an e-ink button on the side of it that basically can be mapped to do different things. So 1 click would do a full page refresh. 2 clicks, open up the app of your choice. 3 clicks, do something else. I mean, basically, the world is your oyster. It's basically a button that can do different things. And on the volume buttons on it, they can actually act as physical page turn buttons too. So as long as like apps can support it, like the native app that's built into it, like the sort of the built-in e-reader app, takes advantage of the volume buttons as like an up and down button. Other apps do that, such as Aldeco and Moon Plus Reader as well, but your mileage may vary. It's using Android 10, which is like fairly modern, but they have like all sorts of cool features like high contrast text. So, if you're nearsighted or you have vision problems, it could like basically increase it up to like 35%. It's good if you have 20/20 vision, you don't really need it, but if like you wear glasses or anything like that, they have all sorts of things like font anti-aliasing, like all these different speed modes. The speed modes could be changed to work with different speed modes for different apps. So if one app has like a lot of animated page turns, you might want to increase the performance mode on it to a higher way. So instead of seeing a page turn, like traditionally on Android e-readers, if you use an app and you do like a physical page turn button, it's not a great experience, because it's like the screen refreshes for each little bit of the animation that happens. But if you turn on a bigger speed mode, it just flips like instantly. So there's some viability there. I mean, it makes a tremendously good e-reader. Like you can sideload in EPUB, MOBI, PRC, AZW, text, PDF, among others. They could be DRM free, or they could like be not. It's really good for manga, but it's like really good with like apps. I mean, you can just sideload in your own apps or alternative like App Store. I just wish more people knew about this because it's like pretty good. And it like, you know, I walk like with my iPhone like 13 Pro Max like in my jeans pocket all the time. And this is the Hisense one, significantly lighter, and because it's using e-paper, like it's just easy on your eyes. And my iPhone, like I'll be lucky if I get like a day out of it before I have to like recharge it at the end of the day, because like I'm using it all the time. Whereas with an e-paper display, for as much as I would use it, it would last like 3 weeks before I have to recharge it. So there is some sort of benefit there. You can listen to, you know, everything like podcasts, music. You can load Spotify on it. You can, you know, do wireless headphones on it and stuff like that. So there's a lot of sort of value with that. So that's pretty well, I think, maybe my top pick of like the best dedicated e-reader of like the year, because it's just so good. Is Barnes & Noble discontinuing the Nook Lowlight Plus? It looks like it. I heard from them in February that they were suffering from component shortages and it would probably be available soon. It's now like the middle of June and they've removed the product from the Nook page. So if you go to the Barnes & Noble website and look at the Nook page, they're pretty well only advertising the Nook Lowlight 4, Nook Lowlight 4E, and the Lenovo Nook Tablets 10. They don't even have, you have to search to see a product page for like the Nook Lowlight Plus. And this is the 7.8 version that came out in 2019. So what's happening? I don't think it's a component shortage. I think at first it was. And then I probably think that they were thinking that it's not the most, considering the price points, their most expensive e-reader. And it lacks significantly behind the competition in terms of specs. Even when it came out, I thought it was woefully like underperforming compared to the things on the market. And this was like in 2019, not a long time ago. So what's happening? So I haven't heard anything like they're releasing a new device. They don't, sometimes they tell me like about a month in advance that they're like, hey, we're going to have something that we're going to announce next month. We sign like an NDA or something like that. I haven't been asked to sign an NDA. If I did sign an NDA, I probably wouldn't be talking about this. So, I mean, I would just say like, hey, the Nook Lowlight looks like it's discontinued. You know, big deal, right? So there's no FCC applications yet, but let's talk about why it's like underperforming and what they could do to make the next version of this good. So if we go back to 2019, things were a little bit different, but not drastically. So when this came out, for instance, it was using a single core processor, 1 gig of RAM, and 8 gigs of internal storage. Like, as a flagship e-reader, sure, they had 300 PPI, but I mean, it really wasn't that good. So what would make it better? Well, it's long in the tooth. Most of the good e-readers these days use Encarta 1200, as we've talked about. And, you know, that's not only page turn speed, but overall performance. You know, like Kindle, Kobo, Pocketbook, like everybody's using this now. And if Barnes & Noble is going to replace their Plus model, they're going to have to at least use this technology. They'll also have to incorporate a capacitive touchscreen display. The current generation Nook Lowlight Plus uses infrared touch. Who uses infrared touch anymore? It's all capacitive, like touchscreen display, whether it's like 2 like finger or 5 finger multi-touch. So Barnes & Noble was only using 17 LED lights on this for both their frontlit display and color temperature system. Most e-readers, like in 2020 or in 2021 or even 2022, are using 27 or more. Some of them are using like 60 like LED lights. So 17 LED lights, come on. I mean, it doesn't allow for a really nice frontlit display with like so few lights. For specs, like they're gonna have to increase it from a single core processor to a quad core processor, triple the RAM. They need at least like 2 to 4 gigs of RAM. They're gonna at least like 64 to 32 gigs of storage. 8 gigs of storage, guys, I mean, that's not gonna fly in 2022. So, I mean, that's my advice to the company on like how they could make a new device that people will actually use. I mean, they have a few strengths going for them. They're one of the few companies that are still doing physical page turn buttons. And that's like a big deal if you're holding it with one hand, juggling a crying baby, or just like in bed at night and you just want to like kind of hold it up like you would a phone, just with like one hand, click the buttons with one hand. Like when you're like on a crowded bus or subway or mass transit or something like that. I mean, being able to just hold it in one hand and like get use out of it while your other hand is like gripping a pole or, doing other things, right? Like you're not having to two-hand this. So that's a strength. Their ecosystem is pretty good. I would probably say their weakest thing. And I kind of agree with a lot of users whenever I write the story. They're like, the hardware is good. Like, it performs well, but always like the software is not where it needs to be. And I think that Barnes & Noble has used the same software for the Nook for like 8 years, maybe longer. They've done a few firmware updates here and there, but nothing that like really increases the performance of it. So I'm thinking like, Carta would increase performance without needing to like rewrite a lot of code. I know that rewriting code as an operating system and stuff is not the easiest thing to do. I mean, we've done apps, we've rewritten things, like we've given our feedback to e-reader companies when they, like a lot of companies. So you guys may not know this, but Peter and I know a lot about e-readers. And we've been doing this since like 2008. So it's kind of gotten to the point where like a lot of new companies, when they're wanting to go to market with like their first device, they'll like send us like a development copy, and they'll be like, yo, can you test this firmware for us? And like, let us know what needs improvement, what needs to be changed. And like, most of the times we do this as like a paid service, and it's not like we're like talking about them on the website. We'll do like every e-reader company that has a new device that I hear about, like, hey, this company is going to be releasing this, and here's the specs, here's underneath the hood, here's the OS that they're going to use, their the standard stuff, where we can kind of like at least inform our audience that something is on the horizon or coming out soon, whether it's a crowdfunding campaign, we'll mention that, and so on. But, behind the scenes, it's like, we'll help these companies out, letting them know, like, should the hardware be better? Are they using the right kind of hardware to take advantage of like the software? What OS are they using? Are you using Android, or if they're using Linux? Most companies these days are using Android because it's so much easier to like program on. Finding Android developers like to make a custom UI or to make fixes, they're like a dime a dozen. They're easy to find no matter what country you live in. Whereas like finding good Linux developers, it's pretty challenging, and they can often command like higher fees because it's not everyone's developing on Linux these days. It's all Android. So we kind of like will test these devices, and we'll film videos and be like, okay, you need to fix this. This is an issue. This is an issue. They'll release a firmware update. We'll test that. We'll test to see if their new firmware update broke anything, or if there's anything else that needs fixing. So it's an extra way that your boys at Goodereader could stay financially solvent and not just rely on ad revenue. As you guys know, I mean, if you visit our website, goodereader.com, there's a lot of ads, because that's like one of the ways that we keep the lights on, that we could afford to pay like 4 or 5 writers to write for us. And, that's the same with like our YouTube revenue. So we need to supplement our income sometimes as a company to be able to, continue to hire new writers and break stories and, to talk about e-readers for like literally like 14 years we've been doing it for? Longer? I'm not good at math. So 2008 to 2022? Yeah, I'm not good at math. I can't tell you exactly that. I've had to like Google when is my birthday and like put in my birthday and be like, how old am I? Because it's like, I don't really even know. So that's like something interesting that you could sort of like do with that. So when it comes to everything else in the e-reader industry, there's a lot of new Chinese devices that are coming out that are running English, which is actually totally surprising, because I kind of talked about this on like a couple months ago. I don't remember when. But it's so refreshing to see all these traditional Chinese companies that only sold their things in China and then, start selling things outside China, but they never like included English. You know what I mean? So it's like they would go find distributors to sell their device, and it's only available in English. And I mean, for instance, if you're a reader of a website, you speak English or another language, or you're listening to this show, I mean, you speak English, and most of the world speaks English. Like Western Europe. I mean, there's a lot of places that speak English. I mean, if you're an airline pilot, and English is like the national language of like the aviation industry. So all traffic control towers, no matter where you are, will speak English. So if an e-reader, it doesn't have English on it, you automatically like alienate like 30% of the world, 40%. Probably not 40, but at least say let's just as an arbitrary figure, 20%. So it's so refreshing to see now companies like, because this is something that I've bitched about literally for like ever since we started reviewing like all these Chinese e-readers. It's like the build quality is really high. They have all these kind of cool features, but it's only like in Chinese, and it's like, well, there's a lot of people living in China. I could see why these companies just focus on China, but I mean, more and more of them are now supporting English. The latest one from Hanvon, of all things. Hanvon is like the quintessential Chinese company. Everything that they do is Chinese audience, but for some reason their N10 eNote that's running Android 11 has English on it. So it's like, hey, we're selling this in our store. We're going to write a review on it. We're going to like make this accessible to people. I mean, we probably won't sell very many, but I mean, whatever, right? There's a company, HiRead is based in Taiwan. They've always just done Chinese e-readers, but their latest generation Gaze Note series, both the 10.3 and their 7.8 have English on it. And so this is like phenomenal. And it's like Taiwanese companies, Chinese companies. It's like, the Huawei MatePad. I mean, quintessential Chinese company. This is their first e-ink product. They support many languages right out of the box. It's so much awesome to see. Whereas like companies like, so how I talked about how we do things for companies. We stay in touch with like a lot of these companies. Like one of the advantages of us having a store is that we're in direct communication with like everyone from like the CEO of a company to the like, the highest level of executives, like the VP of the company or the VP of like an e-reader division. Like iFlyTech like isn't just about e-readers, but they do like AI, they do like government and military contracts. I mean, they have their hands in a lot of different cookie jars. E-readers are just a subdivision of the company. It's just something that they do. We've begged them to do English for years, and they just won't do it. And it's a shame because like almost everyone else, like iReader is an example. Their latest new devices, English. A lot of these companies are very resistant to English. And there's only a few. iFlyTech is probably the one biggest exception, because even to use their devices, you need a Chinese mainland phone number to unlock all the functionality. And sure, you can Google that type of stuff. There's services that provide phone numbers and then codes or whatever to verify it and things like that. But I mean, it's just not user friendly. It's just pure Chinese. But there's so many other brands that are embracing Chinese where they're suddenly the outliers. Xiaomi, all of their e-ink devices supported just pure Chinese. Even the Xiaomi Ink Palm Mini, their first and second generation, Chinese only. Then suddenly the Xiaomi Ink Palm Plus, which I talked about earlier on the show, it's English for the first time. And it's just so refreshing to see all these companies suddenly become relevant on the world stage. It's just not all about Kindle and Amazon and Barnes & Noble or Kobo anymore, but there's suddenly all these cool new brands that have compelling products that are in English that are just waiting for you to get your hands on. So I'm pretty happy with the e-reader industry right now, just because it's not just Chinese anymore. What I mean by that is that a lot of the e-readers that we buy, Kindles, are made in China at Foxconn. Barnes & Noble and Kobo e-readers are made by Netronics in Taiwan. They play a small role in the design and what the hardware will feel like, but it's ultimately designed, assembled, and manufactured in China. So almost all the e-readers that you play with are made in China. So I'm more or less talking about the e-readers that are made, manufactured, distributed, and sold just in China. But suddenly it's I don't know, I guess I'm happy to see that we play a small role in talking to these companies and telling them how much business that they're losing out by not having English, and then suddenly all their new devices have English on it. And it's we do talk with Xiaomi, we do talk to Huawei, we talk to everybody. I mean, anybody who makes an e-reader either solicits our advice far in advance, or they say we ask for contacts with the company. Can we talk to the CEO? Can we talk the VP of the division? And then it's we're talking to them on WeChat or WhatsApp and stuff. And, we're in direct contact with the decision makers. And we just you're making deadly hardware. There's no denying it. But I mean, there is a market outside China that could use your device. So it's just put English on it. It's we'll help facilitate that. We'll sell it in our store. We'll do reviews on it. I mean, we do reviews on it anyways. If you look at our YouTube channel, it's we've been doing reviews of pure Chinese e-readers for years, and they don't get the most hits. People don't really care. It's a lifetime of a video may get 30,000 views. So what? It's $100. But most of the times it's we have to pay for those. But now we get everything just sent to us. There's very few e-readers on the market that we actually have to pay for samples, and it's more or less companies that are not really interested in doing business with us, or Remarkable, for example. They're not too interested in dealing with anybody but themselves. They don't sell their products on Amazon. It's they have their own website, their own distribution chain, their carrier of choice. It's they want to control. It's Apple. They want to control A, B to C. And Apple's, they're selling stuff on Amazon now. They're making some of their products a little bit more accessible outside of apple.com, right? So there is some headway being made with all these traditional companies that are at control over everything. And yeah, I mean, whatever. It's just, the more e-readers that could prospectively be put in readers' hands is nothing but a good thing. And I mean, I think that gets lost in me talking about Chinese e-readers and how they use English and things like that. But it's like, it's just more devices that are accessible to more people. And hopefully that will just promote them to read. And I mean, I'm such an advocate of reading because like so many people these days don't have the time to just like read. I'm not talking about just like scrolling through Reddit or Twitter or Facebook. That's not reading. I'm sorry, it's not. I mean, like reading is like reading a novel, like whether it's fiction or nonfiction. Like for fiction, it's like getting invested in a character or a series of characters or into a time period or into like a world. Or like nonfiction, it's like, a book on Elon Musk, for instance, like, considering he's like the world's richest guy that we know of, that, it's interesting to find out about his early life with like PayPal and, starting up like all these little companies or buying them as they're in their infancy and watching them grow up. It's interesting to read about the people that are just like talked about on a daily basis, like in the world. It's kind of interesting. Most of these are unauthorized biographies, but sometimes, like in the case of Steve Jobs and Walter Isaacson, it's like they were friends that like for like a decade, so they knew of each other and they like, willingly participated like in the book. But yeah, I'm just a huge advocate of like reading because I mean, I wouldn't be able to do this job if I didn't read, or if I loved to read, or if I wanted to promote e-readers, which devices solely geared towards like reading content, books, magazines, manga. It doesn't matter. It's getting invested in something, and I find that like reading is just the most liberating experience. I think I started reading when I was like 3. And when you're at that age, you really don't really understand too many concepts. But my parents had these like Star Wars read-along records. And so I'm like 42. So, cassette players, like, record players. And so it would be like these like Star Wars read-along records where like you'd play a record and you could follow along in a text with like the novel. And so I think that I was, building up like word correlation. So what does this word mean? Following along. It's sort of like the modern day equivalent is like if you use an Amazon app and you have the audiobook too, it will play the audiobook and like the words will be highlighted as the audiobook plays. That's sort of like a modern equivalent of like read-along records. I mean, that's how it all got started. And so that I started reading like before I was like in kindergarten. So, I mean, I was reading at a really early age, not reading, but like building the foundation of like reading. I guess it really was. And then, by like 6, it's like I was reading novels. Like, I was still buying stuff from like the Scholastic Book Fair, but a lot of people were buying picture books or coloring books. It's like, I think I was the only person in all my classes for like the first 4 or 5 years that they were doing that. It was like I was buying novels, like Hardy Boy novels. You know what I mean? Just like literary stuff that wasn't too literary. But I mean, it got me started. I mean, I think everyone, like girls growing up, where they were reading Nancy Drew, boys were reading like Hardy Boys, everybody was reading like Archie books, and stuff like that. So yeah, we always had like those pulpy novels in my house. But my parents loved to read too. Like I think I kind of got that from them. Like my dad was like big into westerns, and my mom was like big into like Harlequin romance books. So I mean, everybody has each their own, but. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I got reading directly from them, but I do know that like when I was like 9 or 10, it's like whenever we would go to like the grocery store, they would have this book section, and I would always make my parents buy me a book every week that we went to the grocery store and I went with them. It's like, I want this book, and like they really didn't and never really said no. They said no to toys. They said no to cookies. They said no to all this crap. Like, I want a 2-liter of Coke, Mom. Like, no, we have like, I don't know, President's Choice cola at home, or we have RC cola at home, but it's a non-name brand, Mom. I don't care. So, but yeah, I mean, to a boy, it's like, can I get a book, Mom? It's like, she didn't even look at the price. She's like, okay, so it was just a thing. And then after a while, it's like, they would drive me to there was a comic book store in my town. So I grew up in a small town in northwestern Ontario, Thunder Bay, Ontario. And it didn't have a lot of bookstores, but there was a comic book store that had this huge, either it was half used books and half new books, and it was all sort of these everything from across the board is mainly fantasy and science fiction, because comic book store. So I kind of got my love into after sort of Hardy Boys and stuff like that. It was getting more into Asimov and I don't know, just all this sort of the quintessential sort of all those sort of novels and things like that. So I think that one of the reasons why I love reading is to get others to read, and that's why I started the site, because it's reading digitally is sort of the future. I mean, when 2008, smartphones didn't really exist back then. I mean, iPhone hadn't even come out yet. It was people had Blackberries or flip phone Nokia phones and stuff like that. Nobody was reading digitally. Everybody was still analog reading, or reading on their PC, a PDF or something like that. Most people were reading physical books. And as smartphones and tablets started to gain prominence, less and less people started to read. I mean, you just look at the Pew Research polls from 2008 to 2020. It's just people are reading less, because more people are listening to Spotify. They're social media on their phone, doing TikTok videos, or there's TV, there's a smorgasbord of really quality shows to satiate anyone's interest, BritBox for British stuff, or Disney Plus for Marvel and Star Wars originals, or all the movies, Netflix. I'm guilty. I read. I'll watch a lot of stuff. I watched Obi-Wan. I'm watching Ms. Marvel. I wasn't really too keen on Moon Knight though, so that's something. I mean, I don't watch all the Marvel movies and stuff. I haven't even seen Doctor Strange yet, but I'm gonna get to it now. That's on Disney Plus. But I don't let that type of stuff control my life. It's just it's a lark. I'm on Facebook maybe once a day. I'm on Twitter just to see what people are talking about. I don't use TikTok. I don't use any of those Pinterest, or I use Reddit a little bit, just to look at memes and stuff like that. So that's pretty well why I do it. But yeah, I mean, I read a book or two a week. So, in the midst of working on Goodereader, being entertained, seeing friends, it's summertime. So it's I'm trying to get my steps in and walking every day to lose weight and stuff like that. So it doesn't leave a lot of time, but I'm still reading all the time. I'm still reading 2 books a week, and it's all just either new books that have just come out, or rereading some, buying a book that I bought 10 years ago and just lost. Just buy it again and read it again. But I'm listening to audiobooks more and more lately, just because sometimes playlists can get a little played out. You know what I mean? The Spotify rabbit hole or Apple Music rabbit hole can only go so far before it's I don't feel like listening to music. I just I want to listen to an audiobook. There's some conjecture, is listening to an audiobook the same thing as reading? Or is it something different? Because you're still getting the spirit of the book. It's just I don't know. I think that there is a fundamental difference between audiobooks and books. it's not that audiobooks are being spoon-fed, which is like a little bit of what they are, but they're easier to digest. Like for people that don't have time to like read, that are commuting for like an hour and a half a day in a car, or they are juggling kids and like, or they're like going to get groceries. I mean, I could see listening to a book over the period of like a couple weeks, that you just do it when you can. You maybe can't pick up a book in the same way as that. So at least your literary thirsts are being satiated by just a different way. So I've always been bullish on audiobooks because more publishers are releasing more frontlist titles as audiobooks. There's all this like cool tech like AI that's making authors' jobs a little bit easier and financially viable. Like let's face it, like hiring a professional narrator, booking engineering time and stuff like that. It's like it's billable hours, and if your book is like 12 hours, that could be like $12,000 or more. And if you're like an entry-level writer that really hasn't sold a lot of books, that's not really a cost that you would want to eat. So voice assistants come into play. It doesn't have the natural inflections and tones as like a real person, but I mean, it's something, you know. It's, I don't know, every sale counts. But I guess like I just grew up reading books, and I read more books than audiobooks, whereas like someone growing up now may just like listen to more audiobooks than real books. I mean, there's a lot of people I know that they've never really read books outside of like having to do book reports like in school or being forced to read at school, but they've like never really read full novels in their life, and that always is troubling to me. I guess it's just different strokes for different blokes, but I find that like books just like expand your mind and just like give you a taste of like some of the possibilities that like this world has to offer. I think reading makes like the world a little bit less scary. And that's been it for the Goodereader Radio Show. I think that you guys have liked this edition. If you like it, drop a comment below on goodereader.com or on YouTube, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.